Welcome to Me to We Productions. Before we go any farther, right now, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and share this video. Get a hold of me, John Cunningham. You can be sitting in this chair right here where Jason Fry is as we're speaking. Because as always, our primary purpose is putting the we back in I. We are here to unify and hear your story. So let's get to it. You know, it's been a long time since we've seen you, Mr. Fry.
Yeah.
How you been?
Been doing all right. Glad to be back, man. Took a little time off. Busy life.
What do you think about the studio?
Studio is absolutely amazing. I cannot wait for all the interviews and all these stories that are going to come through this room and let people know exactly why they are, who they are, and how they got to where they're at.
Absolutely. So let's just go ahead and get into this thing, man. So we want to talk about unity, really. Unity and recovery. And, kind of going with our stories with that and what's kind of happened in our own journeys, our own stories. You're coming up on, 5 years now? Mm-hmm. And I'm coming up on 8. So that's pretty significant. And we got some stories to tell, don't we?
Sure do. Yeah.
So I guess I'll go first here. And when did you first... So you were part of pioneering ROL and Recover Out Loud. And great thanks to you because... you gave me that outlet. We outletted each other for a long time before Recover Out Loud ever existed. And today we're starting to boom a little bit. We're getting a lot of demand. And so, what did you see back in the beginning? Why did you see a need for Recover Out Loud?
Well, I think so. Just going back there, I think that I saw a need for a different generation that pretty much the AA and NA and the Celebrate Recovery and stuff like that, I just wasn't seeing the youth like I wanted to. And I realized at that point that, man, what if we all came together? What if we could all just come together but create a group that unifies all walks of recovery? Because there was no growth in any youth. And you will not be sustainable without growth from the younger generation. And so that's kind of where it all started for me when I first started my journey in recovery, is that I was the youngest in all the rooms.
I'm sure you were.
And I didn't have anyone I could relate with. I couldn't pull somebody aside that was my age and said, man, you want the same thing that I want, right? And to be honest, it always piqued my curiosity that when you went to prison, it was the best thing ever for you.
For me, it was.
Because of the youth that was in there, that age group, and still to this day, John and Andrew were paramount in your recovery because you could relate.
Absolutely. And I want to go there since you just took me there. Because prison for me... And I know a lot of people don't get better in prison. The stats are out there. The statistics are out there. We do not get better in prison. Most people actually go back. But what was different for me was, and you kind of just touched on it, was Andrew Miller. And I think we all have that one person in our story that really breaks us open like that. But I'll never forget when he started talking about, do you really think for yourself, John? Think about that a little bit. And, of course, I was seeking recovery. Don't get me wrong. I went in there with the right attitude. I think, for one, that's parallel across the universe. I don't care what path you choose. You want to choose NA, AA, CR, even exercise. You got to apply it. You got to take some suggestions, things like that for it to work. So I think that's pretty much uniform. And what I got to experience in prison was we sat down at the same tables. And we talked about our stories. And we were allowed to be ourselves. And I started to recover. I could feel it. Even though you, not you specifically, but somebody across the seat from me might be a Buddhist, I was learning a lot from him. So I come out here and I'm on fire for recovery. I am. I remember when we first talked, you knew something was different. Yes. And what I do? What would you do if you came out of prison and you had 3 years clean? And what would Jason Fry do at that point?
If it would just put the shoe on the other foot.
Put the shoe on the other foot, yes. What would you have done?
If I would not have sought a different identity inside the prison and said, you are sober, you are a sober Jason, I would have went back to what I was comfortable with and what I knew, which would have been the streets.
Yes. So you would have came out and you would have sought like-minded people.
Yes.
Yes. And this is where my story takes a big twist. And this is where I started really seeing the need for Recover Out Loud out here. Because that's really what we was doing inside the prison. And so I come out and I start going to the like-minded groups. I was seeking recovery. I thought that's what this was based on. And I started getting a lot of backlash. And this is my story, and it's true. I started getting backlash because I didn't work a program exactly the way they worked a program. Yet here I am, 4 years sober at this point, and I'm not getting any validity. Nobody's validating who I am, and I'm starting to feel alone and isolated again. And I remember that feeling because it was heavy. And so there I am. I go back to my house, and I start with my little house arrest bracelet on, and I start running circles around my house again because that was part of my recovery. I didn't feel valid to say that out loud in the forums that I was going to. And I was starting to hurt.
And I'd like for you to touch on the topic of the diversity that you could recover in any way that you wanted to.
Yes.
As long as you did it.
So let's go there, right? So diversity. I learned. Tony Robbins said something one time because I watched a lot of YouTube videos that really resonated with me. He said, "You have to get resourceful, even when there's no resources." And this was the environment I found myself in. Let's face it, the Bartholomew County jails, there's just not a lot of recovery going on there. A lot of selfishness, a lot of robbery. They were taking each other's stuff, fighting, things like that, right? So I had to get really diverse in my head of how I was going to start recovering because I knew I didn't want to be there. This wasn't the life I wanted to live. So I started exercising. And then I started reading multiple books, not just one. I didn't just dive into one book and take it as the ultimate truth. I wanted to expand my mind. I wanted to grow. And that started working for me. And by the time I got to prison and we sat down at those tables and I got to see all these different stories, they were wild to me how different they were, but also how much the same they were. You know what I'm saying? So I realized then how diverse not only addiction is, but how diverse recovery is too. Me and you, great friends. We're awesome friends. I've known you since, you were 18?
Yeah.
18 years old. Your addiction was different than mine. We were talking about this morning. You were addicted to crack. You were more of an alcoholic. I was more of an opiate guy. Mm-hmm. We both went different paths in our addictions. Mm-hmm. Is our recovery the same?
Yeah. Hello, Recover Out Loud, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly it. There's no difference in the way we are recovering, right? We were the same in addiction. The addictions were different, but the recovery is the same, right?
Mm-hmm.
That you can come from any walk of life, any type of addiction, but recover the same. There should never be a time that, for example, I was in Indianapolis one time, and I walked down to an AA room, getting ready for the meeting to start, very new in recovery, was very passionate, I knew I needed to protect myself. And they said, "Sir, I think you're in the wrong room." And I was like, "Well, what do you mean?" And they're like, "Well, this room's only for alcoholics." And I said, "Well, that's, I suffer with that too."
Right.
I said, "Sir, we just think you're in the wrong room. If you leave, we'd appreciate it." And I said, "Okay, sir." And I walked out, and today, then I was with a couple other people, and I used a lot of, just words that
Language.
I shouldn't have used. Yeah, just language, very bad language. But now today I can see that it really hurt my feelings. That I went down there to heal, and
Mm-hmm.
they told me that I was different than them.
And that's a good point. I mean, yeah, we don't recover on feelings. We know that today. But yeah, when you're in early recovery, when you're just seeking anything but what you've got, because you're wanting something new so bad, getting your feelings hurt like that, that could be detrimental to your recovery journey.
Well, the irony behind it is that the newcomer is always supposed to be the number one person.
Absolutely. And should be. And in some instances they were. And in AA has recovered a lot of people.
They've done a tremendous
They have.
job.
But we also seen that gap.
There's just a gap.
It didn't feel right.
There's just a gap.
There's just a gap. And we got to be honest about that.
Yeah.
We got to start talking about that.
Yeah.
Because I absolutely had the exact same experience in an AA room. I asked. I made it when they were asking, what the topic was. I remember I raised my hand. And I'm like, look, I'm not really an alcoholic, but I'm an addict. I know I've heard in other things where they said, well, just replace the word alcoholic with addict. You'll be all right. And they didn't want me there. And that's okay. And I left that meeting. But there was something that didn't resonate well with me in that. Also, I was asked to speak in a convention. And I was thrilled, like, wow, what a dream come true. I get to go tell my recovery story. And I got a call from their higher ups, and they said, John, do you have a strong NA message? And I said, no, not particularly, but I do have a pretty strong recovery message. And they would not allow me to speak. And that's okay. I get why they do that. But then again, it was a gap. There was another gap that I seen, and this is why Recover Out Loud exists. This is why we do what we do. We've been able to recover people from all walks of recovery, all walks of life. We don't put no rules on it, and this is why. So we want to take the resources that already exist and band them together and sit at the same table and talk on recovery. Then that's it. It gets no further than that. It goes no more than that. There's no more magic to it. And then we go out and we do things together and we get pro-social. And I think, for you said, your recovery is the same. And I get that. I get what you're saying. But I think in other ways we're different. I think, exercise is like humongous, like to the top for me. Is it for you necessarily? No. Are you recovered? Yes. Do you see the point?
Yeah.
Yes. Jason Fry now owns his own home. He's got his own family. He's coming up on 5 years sober. He loves his daughter. His daughter loves him. Who am I to ever look at you and say, you know what, you don't exercise, you're not recovered. Mm-hmm. Man, we will kill people that way.
Yeah. And I think that when I first started recovery, I had this picture of, they said, well, you, because I was at Centerstone, and they're like, you at least have to make 2 meetings a week. And I was like, well, there's only AA in this town. in the picture of my mind, I'd never been to really AA besides at Indianapolis one time. And I realized, like, in my head, it was such a bad taste in my mouth that it's just old guys sitting around drinking coffee, that are not really going to relate with me. And that's not the case. AA is very diverse too.
Absolutely.
What Recover Out Loud really tries to do is get people to understand how diverse recovery is.
Yes.
It's not point A, point
it's
B,
not
point
cookie
C.
cutter.
Yeah. It's not.
No.
It's about, in the grand scope of things, it's about survival.
Yes. We're just trying to survive.
Yeah, it's about survival and overcoming your thought process and developing a different identity. Because if you don't change this,
nothing changes.
Nothing's going to change.
Nothing's going to change, man. It's got to come here. And these paths, all these avenues offer that path. They do. They offer ways to change your mind. And we get that. And what we need now, we're facing an epidemic that's out of control. It is a hot topic. We're always talking about it. And if we don't come together more, this epidemic is going to get stronger. I think it's going to get bigger. I think it's going to get harder and harder and harder to overcome, because unity in recovery seriously, I wonder just how many of us out here are how many people in the gym are ex-addicts and we don't know it. Seriously, how many people are sitting at home right now And because they do arts and crafts or do some kind of paintings, that they're recovered now. We don't know that. We need to know each other.
Mm-hmm.
That's how we're going to get a more of a strong stranglehold on this epidemic.
I had a really good friend yesterday send me a message that said, I bought my daughter a Christmas present. I have extra money left over. I love to be sober. And I was just like, wow. How powerful it can become once you identify differently. Your whole world will change. There was no thought process 5 years ago I'd be where I'm at today.
No, dude.
It just wasn't there for me, you
Right.
know. And I can admit that today that 5 years ago, I pretty much wrote myself off that I was just going to pretty much, everybody was right about me, that I wouldn't amount to anything. And that's through years of abuse and years of trauma.
Right.
That Recover Out Loud lets you come to their meetings and their groups with no parameters.
None.
You can be authentic, and you get to talk about the trauma that is inside of you, and have other people say, "Guess what, bud? You're not alone. I've been there too." And it really resonates with people that are in recovery, because we need more youth to come gather together at Recover Out Loud's groups and meetings and open up the conversation of how diverse recovery is and how it worked for you, to gather some people's confidence, because when you're out there that you're doing wrong.
Yeah.
And
you do.
A lot of the time you don't know why.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the time it has to do with control.
Well, I think
it's
for
chemically.
Me, I see myself as just terminally unique. Like, I thought, okay, I'm out of control. I knew people have recovered before because I've heard of NA. I've heard of AA. I knew people have changed their lives in there, but I just thought, my problems are so big. There's so much more that they don't understand, but I never really gave them a chance. So when I don't know what it is about talk therapy, but when you come in and you just have an open platform, what's on your heart.
But you know it from the beginning that you have an open platform.
Yes. An wide open
platform. That's what Recover Out Loud is.
Yes.
There's no parameters when you walk through the doors.
No. You can come in, whatever's here, start talking
That's
about
what we
it.
value, is your heart.
Yes.
That's the difference.
That is the therapeutic value. It's two human beings sharing their hearts.
Yeah. Always.
Always.
And that's what's the most important in life is kinship, bondship, friendship. That goes farther than anything else ever.
Yeah,
because I guarantee it. Let me tell you something. I know that when you're dying, I know you're going to want your family and your best friends there.
You sure are.
You're not worried about anything else.
No, you're not. And that's what we're trying to get back to.
Yeah.
Yes. And, somewhere I wanted to go real quick with this is, we live in a world, and again, sometimes you just got to talk about things. And we live in a world where sobriety is not really on the forefront of most people's minds. We want everybody to recover. We do. They say, Jason Fry, you need to recover. You need to stop doing that. But we're not going to offer very much out here for you to go do sober things, sober events, whatever. And I remember I started joining softball. And this is kind of where I want to go to this. And softball for me was a huge avenue of recovery. I love softball. I love playing ball. I love playing sports. But the teams I were on, in the beginning, what would they do before the games?
They would drink alcohol.
They would drink alcohol, man. And here I am. All I want to do is be a part of life and be sober. And I want to be embraced as a sober human being. But it's hard to find out there. So Recover Out Loud, I've seen that. We want to recreate sober environments for people to just come and be sober in. And we created 2 softball teams now. Both teams were great. They were fun to be on. And not a single drop of alcohol was drank. No weed was smoked. Nothing but a good time and connection. That is what we're missing.
And talk about, before we go here, talk about Recover Out Loud and the events that you can put on for communities and why that is paramount and so important in the recovery community.
So this is a good question. I'm glad you asked me that. So before we go here, there's a few points I want to make. Is number one, This is not any shot at any recovery program out there. We love them. We understand their value. They are extremely valuable. What we're doing is actually begging and pleading for you to come join us, to come share your thoughts and wisdom with us. We're all the same. What we can do then for communities, if we do find a way to come together on recovery, we can put on these events. We can find pro-social activities. We can do so many things and do them sober together. Because that, I am convinced, is what's going to help recover so many people. It will get us out there in the limelight. You know, if you want to change public policy, you have to change its perception first. And we have to come out and get real with our stories and come together for everyone to see.
And allow these community members to know where they can reach you at and where they can donate at.
Yeah, so you can definitely reach us. Few different ways now. We have a website, recoveroutloudinc.com. On that, you will find our events that we are creating, and you will also find our gatherings and their meeting times. You can also join our Facebook page. We have 2 right now. We have Recover Out Loud, It's a We Thing. That is the community page. Then you can just go to Recover Out Loud, which is the business page. You can also donate on our website. And any donations you might give would be appreciated. And we'll use those donations to create these events, these pro-social events for sober people to come and enjoy themselves. Anything else?
Nope. No, I had just an absolute amazing time, and I look forward to all the videos and all the great people out there, all the people that potentially have been sober for 10, 15, 20 years that come on the show and share their story.
And we're going to continue to progress. If you want to be on Me to We Productions, like I said, just get a hold of me. Right now, you do not see our logo here. We do have one created. It's amazing, ain't it?
Yeah,
it's amazing. So if you want a podcast like we just did, or if you just want to come and give an interview and tell your story from the bottom to the top, get a hold of me. Me to We Productions. Make sure you subscribe and hit that like button.